You've been called smart your whole life. Teachers said you had potential. People told you that if you just applied yourself, you could do anything. And maybe you believed them for a while. But somewhere along the way, something broke. Not all at once. Slowly. Like watching yourself fail in slow motion while everyone around you keeps insisting you're capable of so much more. And the worst part? You agree with them. You know you're smart. You can feel it. But somehow, that intelligence never translates into the life you thought you'd have. The career, the consistency, the follow-through. Instead, you're stuck in this exhausting cycle of starting strong and falling apart, and no amount of trying harder ever seems to change it. If that hits close to home, stay with me. Because what I'm about to walk you through isn't about motivation or discipline or any of that surface-level advice you've already tried 1,000 times. This is about why your brain works the way it does, and why being smart actually makes some of this harder, not easier. If this resonates with you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It helps more people find content like this, and I'd love to have you here as we keep exploring what it really means to live with a neurodivergent brain. Here's the thing nobody tells you about ADHD and intelligence. They're not opposites. They're not even unrelated. They're tangled together in this complicated mess that makes you feel like you're living two completely different lives at the same time. On one hand, you can see solutions other people miss. You can connect ideas in ways that surprise people. You can hyper-focus on something that fascinates you and produce work that's genuinely impressive. But on the other hand, you can't seem to do basic things. You forget appointments. You lose track of time. You start projects with intense energy and abandon them 3 days later. And because you're smart, because people have spent years telling you that you're capable, every single one of those failures feels personal. It feels like proof that something is fundamentally wrong with you. Not your brain. You. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're back in school. You've got a project due in 2 weeks. You know it's important. You know you should start early. And you genuinely intend to. But when you sit down to work on it, nothing happens. It's not that you're procrastinating in the fun way, watching videos or scrolling through your phone guilt-free. You're just sitting there, staring at a blank page, feeling your anxiety build while your brain refuses to cooperate. Days go by. The deadline gets closer. And then, suddenly, the night before it's due, something clicks. Your brain wakes up. You work for hours, fueled by panic and adrenaline, and you pull it off. Maybe you even do well. People are impressed. They say, "See, I knew you could do it." And you feel relieved, but also a little sick, because you know you can't keep living like this. That pattern doesn't go away when you become an adult. It just gets more expensive. Now it's not a school project. It's a work deadline, a bill you forgot to pay, a relationship you didn't nurture because you were too deep in your own head. And every time it happens, the shame gets heavier. Because smart people aren't supposed to struggle with this stuff. Smart people are supposed to have their lives together. But here's what's actually happening. Your brain isn't wired to care about things just because they're important. It's wired to care about things that are interesting, urgent, or novel. That's the dopamine piece. Your brain runs on dopamine the way a car runs on fuel, and if the task in front of you doesn't trigger that dopamine release, your brain essentially shuts down. It's not a choice. It's not laziness. It's a neurological response. And because you're smart, you've probably spent years compensating for this without even realizing it. You've used pressure and panic as your primary source of motivation because that's the only thing that consistently works. The deadline creates urgency. Urgency creates adrenaline. Adrenaline forces your brain to focus. And for a while, it feels like that's just who you are. Someone who works well under pressure. Except it's not sustainable. Because every time you do that, every time you push yourself into that state of emergency to get something done, you're borrowing energy from tomorrow. And eventually, tomorrow comes. You crash. Hard. You feel exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You can't focus on anything. You can't find motivation for even the things you usually enjoy. And people around you don't get it, because just yesterday you were on fire, getting things done, seemingly unstoppable. How can you be so inconsistent? How can you go from being so capable to barely functional in a matter of days? The answer is that your brain isn't inconsistent. It's predictable. It's just operating on a different system than the one most people assume everyone uses. Most people have a relatively steady baseline of dopamine and executive function. They can do boring tasks because their brain rewards them for completing things, even when those things aren't inherently interesting. But your brain doesn't work that way. Your baseline is lower. You need more stimulation to reach the same level of engagement. So you've learned, consciously or not, to create that stimulation artificially. Through pressure, through novelty, through anything that spikes your nervous system enough to get your brain online. And because you're smart, you're good at it. You're good at pulling things off at the last minute. You're good at talking your way through situations where you weren't fully prepared. You're good at making it look like you have things under control, even when you're barely holding it together. But that intelligence, that ability to adapt and compensate, it's also what makes people underestimate what you're dealing with. Because if you can do it when it matters, if you can perform under pressure, then clearly the problem isn't your brain. Clearly, it's just effort, or priorities, or discipline. And so you internalize that. You start believing that the reason you struggle with basic things is because you're not trying hard enough. You're not organized enough. You're not serious enough. And that belief becomes its own trap, because now you're not just dealing with the actual executive dysfunction. You're also dealing with the shame of thinking it's your fault. Let's talk about what that shame does to you over time. It's not just an emotional thing. It's a functional thing. Because when you believe that your struggles are a moral failing, you stop looking for actual solutions. You keep trying to fix yourself with willpower. You download another productivity app. You buy another planner. You promise yourself that this time will be different, that you'll finally get it together, that you'll prove to yourself and everyone else that you're not lazy or careless or irresponsible. And for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, it works. You're on top of everything. You're answering emails on time. You're keeping your space clean. You're doing all the things you're supposed to do. And it feels good. It feels like you've finally cracked the code. But then something happens. A stressful week. A disruption to your routine. One bad night of sleep. And the whole system falls apart. You're back to square one. Except now you also have the weight of another failed attempt sitting on your chest. This is what people don't understand about ADHD and smart people. The problem isn't that you don't know what to do. You know exactly what to do. You've read the articles. You've listened to the advice. You understand, intellectually, how to manage your time and organize your life. But understanding something and being able to execute it consistently are two completely different things. And when you're smart, people assume that if you understand it, you should be able to do it. They don't account for the fact that execution requires a specific type of brain function that you don't have reliable access to. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to build something, but your tools only work some of the time. Sometimes the hammer works great. Sometimes it goes right through the nail like it's not even there. You're not bad at building. You're not lazy. You're not lacking knowledge. You're just working with faulty equipment. And because other people's tools work all the time, they look at you struggling and think you're not trying hard enough. They don't see the tool. They just see the result. That's what executive function is. It's the tool. It's the part of your brain that helps you start tasks, stay on task, switch between tasks, and finish tasks. It's what lets you hold a goal in your mind and move toward it even when the path isn't interesting. And when that tool is unreliable, everything becomes harder. Not impossible, just harder, and inconsistent, and exhausting in a way that's difficult to explain to people who've never experienced it. Here's where it gets even more complicated. Because you're smart, you notice patterns. You see other people succeeding with systems that don't work for you, and you assume the problem is you. You watch someone maintain a daily routine effortlessly, and you think, why can't I do that? You see people finishing projects weeks before the deadline, and you wonder what's wrong with you that you can't seem to start until the last possible moment. And because you can see the gap between where you are and where you think you should be, you feel it more intensely. You're aware of your own dysfunction in a way that makes it impossible to ignore. And that awareness, that intelligence that lets you see the problem so clearly, it also makes the emotional weight of it so much heavier. But here's the shift I want you to sit with. None of this means you're broken. None of this means you're failing at being a person. What it means is that you've been trying to operate a different kind of brain with instructions that were written for someone else. And when those instructions don't work, when you can't just decide to focus or just make yourself care about something boring, that's not a character flaw. That's a neurological reality. Your brain needs different fuel. It needs structure that's flexible. It needs urgency that doesn't come from panic. It needs external accountability because internal motivation isn't always available. And it needs you to stop blaming yourself for needing those things. The smartest thing you can do, the thing that actually changes your life, isn't trying harder. It's understanding how your brain actually works and building a life around that instead of fighting it. It's recognizing that you're not going to suddenly wake up one day with a neurotypical brain, and that's okay. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be understood. By other people, yes, but more importantly, by yourself. You've spent so long thinking the problem was you, your effort, your discipline, your character, and I know how deeply that belief runs, because it's been reinforced every time someone told you that you just needed to try harder, or that you weren't living up to your potential, or that you were too smart to be struggling with something so simple. But the problem was never you. It was the mismatch between how your brain works and what the world expected from you. And once you see that clearly, once you really accept it, everything starts to make sense. Not in a way that makes the struggle disappear, but in a way that makes it bearable. Because now you're not carrying the weight of thinking you're fundamentally flawed. You're just carrying the reality of having a brain that works differently. And that's something you can actually work with. You're not a failure. You never were. You're just someone who's been trying to run on empty while everyone around you kept insisting the tank was full.